The culture of the wrestling room. When I was in high school, my wrestling coach was known as a fun-loving character, full of exuberant humor and youthful enthusiasm. His name is Mike Mazzatelli. We call him Maz for short. He's retired now, but he was a fine wrestling coach and still loves wrestling and still loves life even more. I remember when I wrestled with him during practice, I would get frustrated because he would laugh out loud while I worked hard to score points on him. Whenever I did score any points, he would burst out laughing wildly, as if I was tickling him to death on the mat. It was weird. What I didn't quite understand at the time is that he was having fun while getting scored on because he was proud of me. Some people may think the reason Maz laughed when I scored on him should have been obvious to me. But Maz was from Minnesota, I was from Iowa, and this was in the 1980s. Iowa wrestling has always been known for its hard style and no-nonsense approach. When I wrestled in Cedar Falls, my wrestling coach was a U.S. Marine Corps reservist who kept his military flat top cut high and tight. He would stare holes in us if he suspected we were goofing off, and laughing while in the wrestling room was practically blasphemy. Of course, we still managed to have a lot of fun tearing each other up on the mat. The culture in the wrestling room matters, and every wrestling room has a different culture. One may not be better than the other, but learning the rules, whether spoken or unspoken, is important. It's how we find our place so we can be blessed by and be a blessing to others. Maz wasn't just my high school wrestling coach. He was also my social studies teacher. He didn't laugh and smile nearly as often during social studies class as he did in the wrestling room, but he sure did a lot more than any other teacher I've ever had. One year he taught us about the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. became one of my heroes after high school. I went on to earn my bachelor's degree in intercultural studies and my master's degree in organizational leadership. One of the tools I learned to use in college is called the ethnographic observation. This method of research involves embedding oneself into a culture for extended periods and documenting what you observe. Over time, you'll see patterns in behavior, interactions, workflows, and much more. These patterns make life in the culture more predictable, which, along with a feeling of safety, gives people a sense of trust. The ethnographic observation has been adopted as a business tool for organizational consultants to address inadequacies and improve performance in the work sector. I've had the privilege to use it to address many issues in businesses and in communities. It can be used anywhere people are. Someone skilled in its use can uncover amazing things few people have ever even thought about. As you can see, I like this tool, but it's also ruined me. Now, wherever I go, I notice things. This annoys my friends. I notice things invisible to others and that are only known at a non-conscious level at best. To my great frustration, sometimes it reveals things others don't want to know. This seems especially true in the wrestling room, but some coaches can use it for good. If you're one of them, then keep reading. There are many definitions of culture. Each one seems more complicated than the next. I like to keep things simple. I define culture as that which a group of people consider normal. For me, walking into Maz's wrestling room was scary because it was weird to me. It wasn't weird to anyone who didn't come from a new state to a new school because it was normal to them. If those Minnesota wrestlers went to Iowa for practice, they may have thought the wrestling coaches were recruited from mental institutions or correctional facilities. They weren't. They were just very intense. That was just the way we liked our coaches in Iowa in those days. Cultures are dynamic, so they can and will change. Just like a wrestling move, they can have big advantages in certain circumstances, but not in others. A room full of laughter may score high on the fun scale, but low on the focus, just as a room full of seriousness may score high on focus, but low on fun. It isn't a matter of which is better as much as how we improve. If you're a wrestling coach and want to assess and address the culture in your wrestling room, Here are 3 things you should make yourself aware of right away. The first is the difference between formal and informal instruction. Formal instruction is when steps are taken to educate in an official manner. It comes from officially appointed leaders who can hold official meetings and set official standards. Let's just say that informal instruction is everything else. When you as a wrestling coach call a meeting to deliver a message, it's formal instruction. When the wrestlers spread that information to others during casual conversation, it's informal instruction. When you teach a wrestling move by getting everyone's attention, requiring them to observe, demonstrating the technique, and then observing others as they practice, it's formal instruction. When wrestlers who miss the practice pick up the same move by watching others, it's informal instruction. The second thing you need to be aware of is the difference between commissions and omissions. When a wrestler does something, it's a commission. When a wrestler does not do something, it's an omission. Commissions and omissions can be negative or positive. Smoking cigarettes is a negative commission. Eating healthy is a positive commission. Not showering after practice is a negative omission. Not using profanity is a positive omission. When assessing and addressing the culture of your wrestling room, you need to know what things you want wrestlers to do and not to do that they are already doing and not doing so you can address them appropriately. The next step to assessing and addressing the culture in a wrestling room is to know the difference between incentives and disincentives. What gets rewarded occurs more often in a culture, and what gets condemned occurs less often. When wrestlers are punished for unsportsmanlike conduct, it happens less often. When they're rewarded for unsportsmanlike conduct, it happens more often. You may be wondering how wrestlers are rewarded for unsportsmanlike conduct if sportsmanship is taught formally in the practice room. The answer could be informal instruction. Wrestlers will receive informal instruction outside the wrestling room or even inside the wrestling room behind the coach's back. If those messages are different from the formal instruction provided, something must give, and it isn't always what the coach wants. You can address this example by condemning the undesired commission of unsportsmanlike conduct and rewarding the desired commission of good sportsmanship. Team members who applaud unsportsmanlike conduct in front of or behind the coach's back should be called out formally or reprimanded appropriately. This doesn't mean being rude or humiliating the wrestler. Wrestlers should then be formally instructed to encourage each other to be good sports, and when they are observed doing so, they should be pointed out formally and encouraged appropriately. An example of this is to formally congratulate a wrestler based upon displays of good sportsmanship, or votes by team members, or even surveys of opponents. It's important that this be done publicly so others can see the congratulated wrestler being honored. With these 3 things in mind, you can both assess the culture of the room and have tools to make the changes you see fit. But this isn't merely for manners, laughter, and focus. It's for wrestling too. If your wrestlers are committing technique errors, you can address it through formal instruction and then incentivize the commission of correct technique with formal rewards. Formal rewards are a form of both an incentive and formal instruction. An example is to give an official award to any wrestler that does the spladle correctly in 5 matches. You can call it the Pretzel Award or the Spladle Master Award or whatever you want. An informal reward could be something like wrestlers patting each other on the back or giving each other positive-sounding nicknames for success on the mat. If your wrestlers are resting too long in between repetitions of takedowns, you can formalize the takedown drill by requiring takedowns to be done within 10 seconds of the last takedown. I used this in my wrestling room as a coach, where I counted down from 10 to 1 repeatedly, And if I caught a wrestler who didn't perform a takedown, I made him do extra push-ups. That creates a disincentive. The disincentive then is to make sure that you get your takedowns in within 10 seconds, otherwise you're going to be punished in a formal manner by being required to do 10 push-ups. After you've addressed the situations and taken steps to change things, your wrestlers will begin to expect these changes each day in the wrestling room. When that happens, it's no longer considered a change because it's now just the way your team does things in the wrestling room. Remember the definition of culture? Culture is that which a group of people consider normal. This was a normal practice in my wrestling room as far as making sure they do their takedowns every 10 seconds, so it was part of the culture of our wrestling room, but it wasn't part of the culture of other wrestling rooms. When your wrestlers are used to doing things the way they do, you have successfully changed the culture of your wrestling room.